I need to tell you about my daughter before I forget which version of her is real. Her name is Lily. She's 11 years old. She has a birthmark on her left shoulder blade that looks like a crescent moon, and she hates the way orange juice tastes after brushing her teeth. She's afraid of deep water because she almost drowned when she was 4, and she still sleeps with a stuffed rabbit named Professor Carrots that her grandmother gave her before she passed. She bites her fingernails when she's nervous and laughs at her own jokes before she finishes telling them. She's my daughter. She's always been my daughter. But 3 weeks ago, she came back from summer camp, and something is wrong in a way I can't explain, in a way that makes me doubt everything I thought I knew about reality. I'm writing this because I need someone else to know. I need proof that I'm not losing my mind. And if something happens to me, I need someone to understand what really happened to my little girl, or what happened to whatever is living in my house now, wearing her face. My wife, Karen, and I decided to send Lily to Camp Pinewood this summer. It was supposed to be good for her. She'd been struggling since we moved to the new house, having trouble making friends, spending too much time alone in her room. The camp was in Vermont, nestled in the Green Mountains surrounded by forest and lake. 8 weeks of hiking, swimming, campfires, and cabin life. Karen had gone there as a kid, back when it was called Camp Whispering Pines. She had nothing but good memories. The brochures showed smiling children roasting marshmallows and paddling canoes. It looked wholesome, safe. Lily was nervous about going. She'd never been away from home for more than a sleepover. The night before we drove her up, she crawled into bed with us, something she hadn't done in years. She pressed her face against my chest and asked me to promise that everything would be okay. I promised. We dropped her off on June 15th. I remember the date because it was Father's Day weekend, and I remember thinking it was a strange time to say goodbye to my daughter. The camp was exactly what the brochures promised. Wooden cabins with screen doors, a crystal clear lake, counselors with sun-bleached hair and easy smiles. Lily cried when we left. She stood at the edge of the parking lot, clutching Professor Carrots, and waved until our car disappeared around the bend. Karen cried too. I told her Lily would be fine. Kids are resilient. She'd make friends, have adventures, come home with 1,000 stories. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. Camp Pinewood had a policy of limited contact to help kids adjust. But parents could send letters, and Lily could call home once a week. We got postcards covered in her messy handwriting. She told us about her cabin mates, a girl named Mia who could do a backflip off the dock, and another named Sophie who knew every constellation. She wrote about capture, the flag and arts and crafts, and a counselor named Jake who could play guitar and sing folk songs by the fire. She wrote about hiking to a waterfall and finding a salamander and naming it Gerald. She sounded happy. When she called, her voice was bright and excited. She talked so fast we could barely keep up. She'd gotten over her fear of the water, she said. She could swim to the floating dock now without panicking. She'd made more friends than she could count. She never wanted to come home. Karen and I were so relieved. We talked about how this was exactly what Lily needed, how she'd come back transformed, confident, ready to start 7th grade as a new person. We had no idea how right we would be. When we picked Lily up on August 10th, she ran across the parking lot and threw herself into my arms. She smelled like sunscreen and pine needles. Her hair was lighter from the sun, her skin tanned, her smile enormous. She talked nonstop the entire drive home, every detail from every day of the summer. The time Mia fell in the lake trying to catch a frog. The ghost story Jake told that made everyone scream. The meteor shower they watched from the soccer field. The secret trail behind the Arts cabin that led to a hidden clearing where deer sometimes grazed at dawn. Karen kept looking at me with tears in her eyes. Our awkward, anxious daughter had transformed. She was practically glowing. That night, Lily unpacked her bag on her bed, showing us every craft project, every friendship bracelet, every smooth stone and interesting stick she'd collected. She had a journal filled with inside jokes and cabin rules and the signatures of every friend she'd made. She showed us photos printed from the camp's disposable cameras. Lily in a canoe, Lily at the campfire, Lily covered in face paint for some elaborate game. Professor Carrots appeared in most of the pictures, posed on bunks and balanced on rocks. She went to bed that night without any hesitation, no requests to sleep with us, no nightmares. She seemed, for the first time in years, completely at peace. 3 days later, I called Camp Pinewood about a charge on my credit card that I didn't recognize. When I mentioned Lily's name to confirm she'd been there, the woman on the phone went quiet. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "What was the name again?" "Lily Chen. She was in cabin 7. There was a long pause. I heard typing. "Mr. Chen, I don't have any record of a Lily Chen attending camp this summer." I laughed, certain there was some mistake. I explained the dates, the cabin number, the counselor named Jake. The woman checked again. "Sir, there was no child by that name at Camp Pinewood this summer. Are you sure you have the right camp?" I was sure, of course I was sure. I'd dropped her off myself. I'd watched her wave goodbye. "Check again," I said. Maybe she was registered under my wife's name, Karen Chen, or Karen Mitchell, her maiden name. More typing, more silence. "Sir, I'm looking at our complete roster, and there was no camper matching that description. Cabin 7 had 4 girls this summer, and none of them were named Lily." My stomach dropped. I asked to speak to a supervisor. 20 minutes later, after 3 transferred calls, I was talking to the camp director, a man named David Reynolds. He was apologetic but firm. They'd never received Lily's registration. They'd never received our deposit or our tuition payment. Their records showed no Lily Chen, no Karen Chen, no contact information for our family at all. "Mr. Chen," he said gently, "I'm looking at photographs from every week of camp. Every activity, every meal, every cabin. I've had my staff check twice. Your daughter is not in a single picture." I drove to Vermont the next day. Karen stayed home with Lily, who was happily reorganizing her room and texting with friends from camp. I told Karen I needed to sort out the billing issue in person. I didn't tell her what the camp had really said. The drive took 5 hours. I kept replaying that phone call, certain there had to be some explanation, a clerical error, a database glitch. Maybe they'd merged with another camp and the records got scrambled. There had to be something. Camp Pinewood looked exactly as I remembered it. The same wooden sign, the same gravel parking lot, the same lake glittering through the trees. It was between sessions, the grounds quiet, but a few staff members were preparing for the next group of campers. David Reynolds met me in the main office. He was a large man with a kind face and concerned eyes. He showed me their enrollment system, their filing cabinets, their photograph archives. He called in 2 counselors who'd worked with Cabin 7 all summer. They looked at a photo of Lily that I'd brought. None of them had ever seen her before. "I watched her get on the bus," one of the counselors said. "I checked off every name on my list. She wasn't on it." "That's impossible," I said. "I dropped her off. I stood right there in that parking lot and watched her walk toward the cabins." David Reynolds put his hand on my shoulder. "Mr. Chen, I don't know what happened to your daughter this summer, but she wasn't here. I'm certain of that." I drove home in a daze. My mind kept circling the same impossible questions. If Lily hadn't been at camp, where had she been for 8 weeks? Who had taken care of her? Where did she get all those memories, all those stories, all those souvenirs? And most disturbing of all, if my daughter had been somewhere else for 2 months, who was the girl currently living in my house? I didn't tell Karen what I'd learned. Not yet. I needed to think. I needed to observe. I needed to figure out what was happening before I said anything that couldn't be taken back. That night at dinner, I watched Lily carefully. She ate her favorite meal, chicken parmesan with extra cheese, just like always. She held her fork wrong in that weird grip she'd had since she was a toddler, the one we'd never been able to correct. She complained about the same vegetables she'd always complained about and asked for seconds of the same dessert. She was Lily. Every gesture, every habit, every quirk. She was my daughter, but she'd spent the summer somewhere that didn't exist. After dinner, I asked her about camp. Not the stories, but the specifics. What color were the cabin walls? What was the counselor's last name? What road did the bus take from the parking lot? She answered every question without hesitation. The cabin walls were pale blue with wood trim. Jake's last name was Morrison. The bus took Route 14 north, past a white church with a crooked steeple, then turned left at a stone wall covered in ivy. I wrote everything down after she went to bed. The next morning I drove to Camp Pinewood again, following the route she described. There was no white church. There was no stone wall. Route 14 didn't go anywhere near Camp Pinewood, but Lily had described it with perfect confidence. She described something she couldn't have seen, something that didn't exist. With the same certainty, she described what she'd had for breakfast. Over the following days, I started testing her. Casual questions about home, about school, about memories from before camp. She answered everything correctly: her teacher's name, her best friend's birthday, the time she broke her arm falling off her bike, the words to the lullaby my mother used to sing her. Everything. She remembered my mother. She called her Nai Nai, the same name she'd always used. She remembered the way Nai Nai smelled like jasmine tea, the way she'd slip candy into Lily's pockets when Karen wasn't looking. But she also remembered a summer at a camp that said she never came. I started going through her souvenirs while she was in her room. The friendship bracelets, the art projects, the photographs. I held them up to the light, examined them from every angle. They looked real. They felt real. The photos showed Lily at camp, unmistakably her, surrounded by children I'd never met. I found the parents' addresses in her journal, names and phone numbers for the mothers and fathers of Mia and Sophie, and all the other girls from Cabin 7. I started making calls. The first number was disconnected, the second rang and rang with no answer. The third connected and a woman answered. "Hello, this is David. My daughter Lily was at Camp Pinewood this summer with your daughter Mia." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry," the woman said. "I don't have a daughter." I tried 5 more numbers. 2 were disconnected. 1 was a fax machine. 2 more went to people who claimed they had no children and had never heard of Camp Pinewood. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to Lily's breathing through the baby monitor we still hadn't taken down. She sounded peaceful, normal, like any sleeping child. But my daughter had spent 2 months somewhere, and no one would admit it existed. I decided to check the photos more carefully. I took them to a colleague who did forensic analysis for insurance fraud. I asked him to examine them for any signs of manipulation. He called me 2 days later, his voice strange. "David, where did you get these?" "They're from my daughter's summer camp. Why?" "These photos are wrong," he said. "They're not manipulated exactly, but something's off. The shadows don't match the light sources. The children's reflections in the water don't quite line up with their positions. And look at this one." He sent me an enhanced image of Lily sitting at a campfire. "You see the girl next to her? Look at her hand." I looked. At first I didn't see anything unusual, then I noticed it. The girl's hand, resting on her knee, had 6 fingers. I went through every photo that night. One showed a counselor whose shadow stretched the wrong direction. Another showed a cabin window reflecting trees that weren't there. In a group shot of Cabin 7, every child was smiling. But if you looked closely, none of their eyes were quite the same. I mean that literally. Each child had a different number of irises. One girl had 3. The next morning I found a new photo in Lily's journal. I swear it hadn't been there before. It showed all of Cabin 7 standing by the lake at sunset, their faces orange in the dying light. They were holding hands in a circle, and in the center of the circle was something dark. I couldn't make out what it was, but it cast no shadow, even though everything else did. When I showed the photo to Lily, she smiled. "That was the closing ceremony," she said. "We had to say goodbye to our summer friend." "What summer friend?" She tilted her head like I'd asked a strange question. "The one who lives in the lake, Daddy. The one who teaches us to remember." I started researching. Missing children, unexplained appearances. I found forums and message boards filled with stories that sounded like mine. Parents whose children came back from somewhere they couldn't have been. Husbands whose wives remembered vacations that never happened. People whose relatives spoke of places that had never existed. And then I found a thread that made my blood run cold. A woman wrote about her son, who'd come back from a Boy Scout camp with perfect memories of a summer that the organization had no record of. Like me, she'd investigated. Like me, she'd found impossible photos. Like me, she'd noticed small things that didn't add up. But she'd also noticed something I hadn't. Her son had started to change. Not dramatically, not obviously, just small things at first. He'd suddenly know facts he'd never learned. He'd express opinions he'd never held. He'd reference events that hadn't happened yet, then seem confused when she pointed this out. And then 3 months after he came home, he'd started talking to people who weren't there. 6 months later, he was gone. Not dead, not missing, just gone. She woke up one morning and his room was empty. His bed was made. His belongings were there, but he wasn't. The police found no evidence of a break-in, no signs of struggle, no leads at all. It was like he'd simply ceased to exist. I read through more posts. There were dozens of stories, all variations on the same theme. Children who came back different. Adults who remembered impossible things. People who slowly became strangers to everyone who loved them. And almost all of them ended the same way. One day, they were just gone. I closed my laptop at 3 in the morning, my hands shaking. I walked down the hall to Lily's room. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. She was sitting up in bed, staring at me. "Daddy?" Her voice was the same. Her face was the same. But her eyes, in the darkness, caught the light from the hallway at an angle that seemed wrong. For just a moment, I thought I saw something behind them. Something watching. Something waiting. "Just checking on you, sweetheart," I said. "Go back to sleep." She smiled and lay down. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Lily." I closed the door and stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to my own heartbeat. After that night, I started keeping a journal. Every day, I wrote down everything Lily said and did. I was looking for patterns, changes, evidence that I wasn't imagining things. At first, she seemed completely normal, the loving, happy daughter who'd come home from camp. But within a week, I started noticing things. She'd ask for foods she'd never liked before. Brussels sprouts, black coffee, sardines from a tin. When I reminded her that she hated these things, she'd look confused for a moment, then laugh and say she must have tried them at camp. She'd use words she shouldn't know. Esoteric, simulacrum, Anthropocene. When I asked where she'd learned them, she'd shrug and change the subject. She'd wake up at exactly 3:33 every morning. I knew because I started checking. I'd stand outside her door with my phone, watching the minutes tick by, and at 3:33 precisely, I'd hear her bed creak. Just once. Then silence again. I asked her why she was waking up. She said she wasn't. She said she slept through every night without interruption. She looked genuinely surprised that I would suggest otherwise. But I know what I heard. One night I set up a camera outside her room. I wanted to see what happened at 3:33. I wanted proof. The footage showed nothing unusual until 3:32. Then the hallway light flickered. At 3:33 exactly, Lily's door swung open and she walked out. Her eyes were open but blank. She walked to the window at the end of the hall and stood there staring out at the backyard, at the woods beyond. She stood there for exactly 7 minutes. At 3:40, she turned and walked back to her room. The door closed behind her. The next morning, she had no memory of it. 2 weeks after camp ended, Lily asked if she could call Lily, her friend Sophie. She wanted to invite her for a sleepover. She looked so hopeful, so excited, that I couldn't refuse. I watched her dial the number from memory. The phone rang. Someone answered. Lily chatted for 10 minutes about school starting soon and how she missed everyone and how she wished camp had lasted forever. She laughed at something Sophie said. She promised to write. When she hung up, she was beaming. "Sophie says hi," she said. "She misses me so much." I excused myself to the bathroom. I pulled out my phone and dialed the same number Lily had just called. "The number you have dialed is not in service." I tried again. "The number you have dialed is not in service." I went back to the living room. Lily was drawing in her sketchbooks, humming a song I didn't recognize. The melody was strange, discordant, notes that didn't seem to follow any scale I knew. When I asked what she was drawing, she showed me. It was a cabin by a lake. The cabin walls were pale blue with wood trim. The sky was clear except for a single dark cloud, perfectly circular, hanging directly overhead. "That's my cabin from camp," she said proudly. I looked closer at the drawing. In the window of the cabin, she'd drawn a figure, a person standing just inside, watching out. The person had no face. A month passed. Then 2. Lily started 7th grade, and for a while, I convinced myself that everything was fine. She made friends at school, she did her homework, she seemed happy, healthy, normal. But the nights kept getting worse. I'd wake at 3:33 and find her standing in the hallway, staring at nothing. When I touched her shoulder, she'd turn to me with empty eyes and say things that made no sense. "They're almost ready, Daddy. The door is so thin here. She's waiting for me to remember." Then she'd blink, smile, and ask why we were standing in the hallway in the middle of the night. Karen started noticing too. She found Lily in the backyard at dawn, barefoot in the frost, staring at the woods behind our house. When Karen asked what she was doing, Lily said she was waiting for her friends. "What friends, sweetheart?" "The friends from camp. They're coming to visit soon." There was something in the way she said it that made Karen back away. She told me about it that night, her voice trembling. She said Lily's eyes had looked different in that moment. Older. Knowing. "David," she whispered, "something happened to our daughter this summer." I almost told her everything then. The camp that had no record of Lily, the photos with the impossible details, the phone numbers that connected to nothing. But I looked at Karen's face, pale and frightened, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't break her world the way mine had been broken. "I'll figure it out," I said. "I promise." That was the second promise I made about Lily. I was already starting to wonder if I'd be able to keep it. In October, Lily started leaving notes around the house. Little scraps of paper with strange symbols I didn't recognize. They looked almost like letters, but from an alphabet I'd never seen. When I asked her about them, she said she was practicing the writing she'd learned at camp. "What kind of writing?" "Special writing. For sending messages to my friends." "What kind of messages?" She just smiled. That same sweet smile she'd always had. But something behind it was different now. Something was watching me through my daughter's eyes, and it was amused. One night I gathered all the notes I'd found and took them to a professor at the university who specialized in linguistics. I told him they were from a puzzle book, something my daughter was working on. He studied them for a long time. "These aren't from any language I recognize," he finally said, "but they're consistent. Whoever wrote these was using a real system, not random symbols. There's grammar here, syntax. So it's a constructed language? Like Elvish from Lord of the Rings." Hugh shook his head slowly. "No. Constructed languages follow patterns from natural languages. This is different. The structure is, I don't know how to describe it, it's circular. The sentences fold back on themselves. It's like they're meant to be read from multiple directions at once." He handed the notes back to me. "Where did you say your daughter learned this?" I took the notes and left without answering. The dreams started in November, and with them everything got worse. Not Lily's dreams. Mine. Every night I dreamed of the camp. The camp that didn't exist. I walked through cabins that stretched impossibly long, their pale blue walls rippling like water. I stood by a lake that had no bottom, watching children swim deeper and deeper until they disappeared into darkness. I heard singing around campfires that burned without heat, songs in languages that made my ears ache. And in every dream, I saw Lily. But not my Lily. A Lily who had been at that camp for much longer than 8 weeks. A Lily who had learned things in those endless cabins down by that bottomless lake. A Lily who had made friends with creatures that wore children's faces like masks. In one dream, I found myself sitting at the campfire. The children around me were singing, but their mouths weren't moving. The sound came from somewhere beneath us, from deep underground. Lily sat across from me, and when our eyes met, she shook her head sadly. "You're not supposed to be here, Daddy," she said. "This place isn't for people like you." "Where is here?" I asked. She pointed at the lake. In my dream, I could see through the water, down and down and down to something vast and dark and pulsing at the bottom. "It's where we learn to become doors," she said. I woke from these dreams crying. I woke speaking words I didn't understand. Once, I woke to find myself standing at Lily's bedroom door, my hand on the knob. With no memory of walking there, she was awake inside. I could hear her side. I could breathing. "I know you're there, Daddy," she said through the door. "It's okay. You can come in. They're not ready yet." I ran back to my bedroom and didn't sleep again until dawn. In December, I made a decision. I had to know the truth, whatever it cost, whatever I found. I had to understand what had happened to my daughter. I told Karen I was going on a business trip. Instead, I drove to Vermont. Not to Camp Pinewood, but to the route Lily had described, the one that didn't exist. Route 14 North. Past a white church with a crooked steeple, left at a stone wall covered in ivy. I drove Route 14 for hours. There was no white church, there was no stone wall. The road wound through forests and small towns and eventually ended at the Canadian border. But on my way back, just as the sun was setting, I saw something. A side road I hadn't noticed before, unmarked, unpaved, nearly invisible in the fading light. I turned onto it. The road twisted through dense forest, the trees pressing close on either side. My headlights caught glimpses of something white through the branches, and my heart began to race. I drove faster, and then I saw it. A white church with a crooked steeple. I stopped the car and got out. The church was old, its paint peeling, its windows dark. The steeple leaned at an impossible angle, defying gravity. No road led to it, no path. It simply stood in a clearing that shouldn't have existed, surrounded by trees that seemed to lean away from it. Beyond the church, I could see a stone wall. It was covered in ivy, just as Lily had described. I walked toward it. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I couldn't. I had to know. The wall was old. Older than any wall had a right to be in Vermont. The stones were worn smooth, covered in symbols that matched the ones from Lily's notes. And beyond the wall, barely visible in the dying light, I could see a camp, cabins, a lake, a path leading down to a dock. But something was wrong. The camp was empty, not abandoned. Empty in a way that suggested it had never been occupied at all. The cabins had no doors, no windows, just openings that gaped like mouths. The lake didn't reflect the sky. It reflected something else, something dark and vast and patient. And standing at the edge of the dock was a figure. It was shaped like a child. It stood perfectly still, facing away from me, looking out over the water. "Hello?" I called. The figure turned. It had Lily's face, but the proportions were wrong. The eyes were too large, the mouth too wide. And in the fading light, I could see that its shadow stretched behind it across the dock, reaching into the lake, connecting to something beneath the surface. Something was looking at me through my daughter's eyes. "Daddy," it said, and its voice was Lily's voice, but coming from somewhere deep underground. "You found the real camp." "Where is my daughter?" I managed to say. "What did you do to her?" The thing wearing Lily's face tilted its head. We didn't do anything to her, Daddy. We made her better. We made her remember. We made her into a door. A door to what? It smiled, and there were too many teeth in that smile. To us. I ran back to my car and drove until the road disappeared and I was back on Route 14 with no memory of how I'd gotten there. I drove home without stopping, and when I arrived at 3 a.m, I found Karen crying in the kitchen. "Lily's gone," she said. I ran upstairs. Lily's room was empty. Her bed was made. Her belongings were there. Professor Carrot sat on her pillow, his button eyes staring at the ceiling. But Lily was gone. "She just vanished," Karen sobbed. "I checked on her at midnight and she was sleeping. And then I woke up and she was just gone. I held my wife and tried to comfort her. But my mind was back at that impossible camp, standing in front of that dock, looking at the thing wearing my daughter's face. They found Lily in the woods behind our house at dawn. She was standing in a clearing, barefoot in the snow, smiling. Her lips were blue. Her skin was ice cold. But she was alive. She said she'd been sleepwalking. She said she didn't remember anything. She let Karen wrap her in blankets and feed her hot cocoa and cry over her. But as the paramedics checked her over, she caught my eye across the room. And she smiled. Not my daughter's smile. Something older. Something that had been waiting a very long time for this moment. That was 3 weeks ago. Lily is still here. She goes to school. She does her homework. She tells Karen she loves her. She's perfect. But I know what I saw in Vermont. I know what spoke to me from the dock. And I know that whatever came back from that impossible camp, whatever has been living in my house and wearing my daughter's face, it's not finished. The symbols from Lily's notes have started appearing in other places now. I find them scratched into the walls behind furniture, carved into the trees in the backyard, etched into my bathroom mirror, so faintly I can only see them when the glass fogs over. They spell something. I'm certain of that now. A message, or an invitation, or a warning. I've been trying to decode them, matching them against the professor's analysis, looking for patterns. I think they're directions. I think they're telling someone how to find us. Last night I woke at 3:33 and went to Lily's room. She wasn't in bed. She was standing at her window looking out at the woods. Her breath fogged the glass, and in the fog, I could see words appearing. Words in that impossible, circular language. "Who are you writing to?" I asked. "My friends," she said without turning around. "They're so close now, Daddy, they can almost see our house." "What friends, Lily?" She turned then, and in the darkness, her eyes caught the light at that wrong angle again. And for just a moment, I saw something behind them. Something vast, something hungry, something that had been patient for so very long. "The friends I made at camp," she said. "They want to meet you, Daddy. They want to meet everyone. I don't know how much time we have. I don't know what's coming through the door that the thing wearing my daughter's face has been opening. I only know that it's almost ready." The last note I found was different from the others. It wasn't symbols. It was English. My daughter's handwriting, but different somehow. Older. More deliberate, it said. "When we first brought her back, we thought she was perfect. We didn't realize the truth until much too late. She remembers everything because she was never meant to forget. She was meant to be the door. And now the door is almost open. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tell them not to answer when she calls." I don't know who wrote that note. I don't know if it was Lily or the thing inside Lily or something trying to warn us from wherever my real daughter went. The handwriting matches Lily's perfectly, but the words feel like they're coming from somewhere else. Someone else. Maybe from the thing that lives in the bottomless lake. Maybe from my real daughter, still conscious somewhere deep inside, fighting to send one last message. All I know is that my daughter came back from summer camp, remembering everything, every inside joke, every detail. But the camp says she never arrived. And sometimes, late at night, when Lily is sleeping and the house is quiet, I can hear sounds from the woods behind our house. Sounds like children laughing. Sounds like singing around a campfire that burns without heat. Sounds like something walking toward us through the trees, getting closer with each passing night. Yesterday, Karen told me she's been having the dreams too. The camp, the lake, the children with too many eyes. She said she woke up and found symbols scratched into her arm. Symbols that match Lily's notes. She didn't remember making them. Tonight I'm going to confront whatever is wearing my daughter's face. I'm going to demand to know where my real daughter is, what they've done to her, what they want from us. I don't expect to survive, but I have to try. I have to know. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. It means the door finally opened. It means they're here. Don't answer when she calls. Don't look at the photographs too closely. And whatever you do, don't send your children to summer camp, because sometimes they come back perfect. And that's the worst thing that can happen. She came back perfect. I'm starting to understand what that means. And I'm terrified of what comes next's face has been opening. I only know that it's almost ready. The last note I found was different from the others. It wasn't symbols, it was English. My daughter's handwriting, but different somehow. Older. It said, "When we first brought her back, we thought she was perfect. We didn't realize the truth until much too late. She remembers everything because she was never meant to forget. She was meant to be the door. And now the door is almost open. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tell them not to answer when she calls." I don't know who wrote that note. I don't know if it was Lily or the thing inside Lily or something trying to warn us from wherever my real daughter went. All I know is that my daughter came back from summer camp remembering everything. Every inside joke, every detail. But the camp says she never arrived. And sometimes late at night, when Lily is sleeping and the house is quiet, I can hear sounds from the woods behind our house. Sounds like children laughing. Sounds like singing around a campfire that burns without heat. Sounds like something walking toward us through the trees, getting closer with each passing night. She came back perfect. I'm starting to understand what that means. And I'm terrified of what comes next.